Welcome to Student Docs. I'm Ginger Fries with Radnor Studio 21. Over the next several months, we will be exploring some exceptional documentaries that have been coming out of Villanova University's Social Justice Documentary Film course. And we have the chance to speak with the students as well. Today I have Jack McCarthy, the director of a recent release, and Tara Coughlin as well. So I'm really glad that you're here today. Welcome. And could you tell me a little bit about this class that Villanova University offers?
Yeah, so the Villanova Social Justice Documentary Program is an amazing class. It takes 10 to 15 students, and we find a topic that's related to social justice that we're all passionate about, and we make a film about it. And we learn about the issue. We learn how to make a movie. You know, it's a team effort. Everyone has their hands in every single part of it. So you learn how to edit. You learn how to shoot. You learn how to give an interview. You learn how to do audio. And everybody learns about the social justice issue. So it's a really awesome course.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. Our professors are really hands-on, and we all get to learn different, like he said, different aspects of the production process. Like, he was the director, and I took role of one of the cinematographers, and we really all, it was very much a group effort.
Mm-hmm. And how do you have a selection process in discovering what you would like to do the documentary on, the subject matter?
Yeah, so in the beginning of the course, we go back and forth about a few topics, and this one won clearly. We were all passionate about prison reform. It was an issue that we didn't know much about going into, but we found interesting, and through the filmmaking process, we learned a lot and really grew to love the source material and understand it, and yeah, it was a really awesome experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely going into a maximum security prison wasn't something I was expecting from college experience, but it was been really an amazing experience.
Yeah. What would you say has been the most challenging in this particular documentary that you did? Was it the visiting there, the producing, and getting the permissions? Or?
I think a lot of it was also staying in touch with the inmates that had been released. He can tell you a lot about that, trying to stay in touch with men who had never had a cell phone before, who are now in their elderly stage in their life, don't really know how to work one. So it was definitely a little bit of a struggle, and going to the prison in general was always an experience.
And to add on to that, it was really difficult just in terms of from a bureaucratic standpoint. The prison was kind of a nightmare. Sometimes we would be able to go in there, sometimes we wouldn't, and we weren't able to show the men's faces, and we weren't able to tell their stories. So that was a pretty difficult framework to make a film in. But I think it challenged us as filmmakers to get creative, and you'll see in the film how we kind of work around that.
Yeah, that's marvelous. I think that this is very fluid. I think you've really presented this very nicely. So I'm anxious to bring it. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what we're going to see now?
Yeah, so The Mayor of Graterford is an in-depth look at the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania, and it follows the life of Tyrone Werts and his story, and how it relates to the broader scale of the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania and lifers without parole, and whether that's just. And there's a lot of themes like redemption and giving people second chances, and eye for an eye. Yeah, so it's a really a powerful story that Tyrone has lived, and we were just thrilled to be able to give him a platform to tell his story.
Yes. How did you find him in particular?
Yeah, so we interviewed multiple lifers that had gotten out, and we were all just so compelled by Tyrone's story that we just had to make a movie about him. It was just not even a question.
Yeah,
definitely deserves the title, The Mayor of Graterford, because he has just inspired so many of the guys in there. And when he came out, he said, "I'm definitely going to go back, but not in handcuffs." So it's really powerful.
Yeah, he seems very personable, and he seems to carry a lot of hope, and I think that's really nice. So now I'd love to be able to introduce everybody to the Mayor of Graterford, and we'll be back to discuss afterward.
So Graterford's an old prison built in the 1920s, actually by inmates from Eastern State. It is classified as a higher level or maximum security prison. It's a place that has a lot of lifers, about 700 lifers out of 3,000 inmates, so a huge portion of lifers. Pennsylvania is one of the few states, but maybe the only Northeast state that life means life.
In most American states, there's a chance that if you were given a life sentence, you could be paroled, but not in Pennsylvania.
I think there's some people who probably should never get out. And I think there's some people who there's no way they should be doing life in prison for what they did or the role that they played.
We got almost 5,000 lifers, one of the largest lifer populations in the United States per capita. Now, I'll tell you, I know some lifers I would never let out, all right? And there's some that I think should have been out already. They're not all bad.
I dress a particular way because I want people, when they see me, they see what a lifer looks like. And I was in prison 37 years. I never thought I'd see anything outside the wall of Graterford, but here I am. When I first went into Graterford, when I first received my life sentence, there were only 500 men and women serving life without parole. But the day I walked out, it was 5,000. I hate seatbelts, man. The last thing I want to do is be restricted again, The night of the incident, it was me and 3 other friends. We had decided to rob this drug dealer. To be honest with you, there was a way to make some easy money, but in some twisted way, we kind of felt like it was a noble concept to rob drug dealers because I thought they were destroying the community. But that particular night, the drug dealer that we was going to rob, we couldn't locate him. And so we picked up another guy. He brought up the idea that there was another robbery that we could commit. I told him that I'm not doing that. That's not what I came here to do. But they decided to go ahead and go on with the robbery. And I stayed in the passenger side of the car. My friend, he was nervous, pulled the hammer back on the gun and waved the gun around, the gun went off. And when they came back to the car, they drove off and they said somebody got shot. And about 30 days later, the police came to my home and kicked my door in and drugged me out, took me down to homicide and charged me with murder. At some points, about 6 months later, I went to trial. And the prosecutor came to my lawyer and said, look, we know that Tyrone's culpability in this crime was minimal, and so we want to offer him a deal to plead guilty to murder, and we will give him 8 to 20 years in prison. I said, I'm innocent. I'm not pleading guilty to murder. I said, because I didn't kill anybody. So I decided to go to trial with the jury because I felt like if I got on the stand and testified and said what happened that night, that the jury would found me either innocent or found me maybe guilty of something less than murder. Obviously, I was wrong. The jury came back and convicted me of second-degree murder, and in Pennsylvania, second-degree murder carries a mandatory life without parole sentence.
Now, you might ask, why was he charged with murder? Because of the fact that in Pennsylvania, if you're a participant in a crime, even if you're outside in the car, you are guilty of second-degree murder.
One of the great misconceptions about life imprisonment is that lifers have all committed a homicide or a violent offense. And that's not technically true in many cases. There are about 17,000 people that are serving life sentence now that have not committed a violent offense.
The only way a lifer can get out is through the commutation process. And the commutation process is very political. You have 5 people that sit on the commutation board, the pardon board. You have a lieutenant governor, you have a attorney general, you have a crime victim, you have a corrections expert and a psychologist.
The governor has to approve recommendations. The governor can absolutely say no or absolutely say yes. The governor can't approve a recommendation which doesn't get the okay of the pardons board.
I was essentially lucky to have made it out to be with my family and to be free There are so many guys, not just lifers, but people who serve in long times who deserve the same opportunity. But that one, all it takes is one. Resume Fad, because prior Resume Fad, every lifer that gotten out, never heard from him. We felt like he manipulated the system, played on the decision makers, and it paid off for him. And we thought that he would just disappear and go about his way, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way.
Probably the most infamous case in the history of the pardons board process in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I was on the pardons board at that time, and the reason that was advanced for him to be commuted was, well, he was a snitch in the 1989 Camp Hill, Pennsylvania riots, where the prisoners took over some buildings and burned some buildings down. That's one of the reasons why the Department of Corrections was promoting him. Not good enough for me. And they said, well, Ernie, we think we should go along with this. I said, I'm afraid I can't agree with you there. The vote was 4-1. And nonetheless, he got commuted. And within months after he got commuted, he committed a couple of murders, a rape, and the rest is history. So basically what you had for the better part of a decade or more, nobody getting commuted out of Pennsylvania's lifer population.
So you can just imagine how emotional it is for me to see guys that I grew up with who will more than likely die in prison because of a political system that doesn't look favorably upon them. You know, so what I really wanted to see, just go back in and see the guys and give them some hope, because if you don't have hope, I mean, what do you have when you know that your life is on the line? This is the 30-foot concrete wall. It's built on a hexagonal plan with a gun tower at each bend. So I'm just gonna go in, man, try to be a beacon of hope, you know.
I'm on Front Street. I'm on Front Street. How you doing? Hey, what's up, man? I almost thought I had to go for the damn metal detector. What's up, man? How you doing? What you up to? I'm good, man. How you making up there? Still fighting. Still fighting. Now this is very interesting. This is the senior yard. The guys, we call this Jurassic Park, right? Because of all the old guys. We call it Jurassic Park. I used to work right there. Yeah, right good. Yo! Nothing much, man. You coming down? Hey, how you doing? I see the gang's all here. What's up, baby? Everything's good, man. Oh, damn, brother. Don't get your hand in my pocket.
You always looking sharp.
I love you too, man. I'm just living life, man. I'm just trying to represent, man. You know what I mean? So I didn't struggle. Hey, what's up there, young fella? It's a pleasure to always come up here, man, for me. You know, it's always a pleasure, man. Every time they say go to Graterford, I say, I'm counting me in, you know what I mean? I know everybody. I got a lot of friends up here that, I'm still fighting for.
I met Ty in 1974, 75.
Can you skip him?
Brother made a hell of a transition from how it used to be to now.
Yeah, you can imagine when I got found guilty, I went in very angry, very bitter. I mean, I hated the criminal justice system. I had basically an all-white jury, and I just couldn't understand how they could find me guilty of murder when I hadn't killed anybody. So I go in Graterford and I'm angry and I'm bitter. And the only thing I had on my mind was getting out. Then one night, man, I thought about my family's missing me. I'm saying, man, I gotta do something different with my life. And that's when I started going to school and getting involved in organizations, you know. So I tried to create a life for myself while I was here. This is my environment. I'll try to leave a legacy, you know, whether I was gonna get out or not.
And I used to notice how Ty used to always be moving. He always go to school or go down to the law library. And so one day I was doing something that I wasn't supposed to do. And he seen me, he said, "What you doing with your education?" And that stuck with me.
This is elementary school I went to, and the most vivid thing I remember about elementary school was the experience I had with the teacher. I always call her the equal opportunity humiliator, because she always humiliated kids. So Ms. Gomez asked all the kids in the class to write a paragraph about what you wanted to be when you grew up. I was excited about that because in my neighborhood at that time, there was a guy that had a telescope on his roof, and I used to go up there and sit with him, and me and a couple other kids. He used to teach us all about the universe. That kind of inspired me. So I wrote my paragraph over that weekend, and that Monday morning went to school, and the teacher started to call each child up to read their paragraph. And as each child came up and read their paragraph, the kids in the room would clap for them. And you know, there was the normal things like policemen, firemen. And then when my turn came, she called my name. I went to the front of the class, and at the end I announced that I wanted to be an astronomer, right? And I was really proud when I said it. It shocked Ms. Gomez to the point where she spun around and looked at me sternly and said, "An astronomer?" She said, "You gotta be very, very bright to be an astronomer, and you're not that smart. I want you to go back to your seat and come up with something that you can actually do." And I was humiliated, and as I walked back to my seat, and all the kids in the classroom laughed at me. And so when she told me that I wasn't that smart, I kind of internalized that message, and I took it to heart. And so I began to tell myself, you know, why should I go to school if I'm not that smart, if I can't learn? And, you know, it was in that moment that I began to lose value for education. So I began to just go to school, just hang out with my friends, not to learn, because I didn't think I could. Then I contrast that against my experience when I got to Graterford. And someone who went in at 23 years old, had a life without parole sentence, my interest in school was nil. I didn't really want to go to school, so I resisted. When I first got to prison, you know, you got to take a battery of tests. There was a guy there who was a teacher in the school department. I was just reviewing your test scores. He said, "I just want to let you know that you're reading at a second grade level, your math skills are third grade, your comprehension skills are third grade." And I'm sitting there saying, "Okay, you're not telling me anything I don't already know. I know I'm dumb, so why are you telling me this?" He said, "But I want to let you know your IQ is above average." He said, "You can do academic work, you're just not applying yourself." And he convinced me, you know, to join his class. And I did, and when I did, I did pretty well. You know, he was giving me books to read, and he was helped me diagram sentences, and you know, I did pretty well. And eventually, when it came time to take the GED test, I took the test, I passed it. It was about 50 guys took the test, and I got the highest score than anyone that took the test, which kind of shocked me. You know, because all these years I was telling myself that I was dumb and I couldn't learn. But I passed, and I was the valedictorian at the graduation. So that put my life on a particular track. I found out that I was smart and that I could do academic work. And at the time, Villanova was bringing college courses in to Graterford to take guys to degrees, and I signed up for college. And I did well, and I eventually graduated with a bachelor's degree. At the same time, I was fighting and appealing my case.
I was trying to educate myself and everything, right? And people were talking about, why educate yourself? Why get better? You know, don't you know what just happened? You know, everybody's hope died.
And you know, to be honest with you, like when we talk about hope, I mean, I was doing all this stuff, man, but just based on the political landscape, I didn't have a whole lot of hope.
The Reginald McFadden situation left everybody totally hopeless.
This is Eyewitness News Tonight.
Pennsylvania gubernatorial candidate Mark Singal is doing some explaining tonight.
Singal is calling it the worst decision of his political career.
The Democratic gubernatorial candidate says he should never have voted to commute the life sentence of Reginald McFadden.
Reginald McFadden is now behind bars in New York State under suspicion of kidnapping, rape, and murder. As a chairman of the State Board of Pardons, Singal was among 4 of the panel's 5 members who voted to commute McFadden's sentence.
1 month before the gubernatorial election in 1994, it was Singal versus Ridge. We had never trailed in that race. We were cruising to an easy victory, but an incident occurs in New York, and we're told that it involved Reginald McFadden.
If they would have asked anybody, even back then, they would have said, oh, you got the wrong candidate. He needs some help. Maybe we can deal with it and review him in a couple more years, but he needs some help.
Every day I would check on him because he would sit in the cell in the dark talking to himself. So when I heard that he had made commutation, I said, how did that happen?
Every time you voted for a commutation, there was the risk that that person would betray the public trust. And as history has shown, when that occurs, there are devastating consequences.
The day I am sworn in, I'm going to call a special session of the legislature. We're going to stay there however long it takes. Prison reform, sentencing reform. And you better believe that when Mark Singal and I contrast our records on crime, you'll see which one of us has been the prosecutor. Personally and politically, I'll match my record on crime against this guy's any day in the week.
Mark Singal, bad judgment, too liberal on crime.
It was just a really powerful attack, and it was like a lightning bolt in that campaign.
It was a graphic illustration of a series of decisions that you made to commute murderers and rapists and other predators. What you understand is it was my job to put him in jail. I did my job. As lieutenant governor, I'd have thought it'd been your job to keep lifers doing life sentences, and you didn't do yours.
As a result of the election of Tom Ridge, he immediately instituted, when he became the governor, a crime session. So he proposed that we go from the then majority vote, 3-2, to an absolute unanimous vote, 5-0. So that if one person objected on the Board of Pardons, the commutation would never get to the governor.
Well, if you think about that, it basically slams the door on mercy, because anybody and everybody on that board now has veto power.
I supported that legislation. I felt that the majority of cases were going to be unanimous anyway, because the records of that particular inmate were going to be significantly good enough to warrant the governor commuting him. It didn't turn out that way.
The creation of not only my position as an independent victim advocate, but the creation of my entire office happened. When McFadden happened, we as a Commonwealth swung way too tough on crime. Lock him up, throw away the key, and that was our reaction. But then what it also did on the other side was it basically froze the commutation process. And it basically sent a chilling message to every single inmate in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania: don't even think about applying because you're not going to be considered. And that was the reality for decades in Pennsylvania.
And that lifer population continued to grow, and it continued to age, and this was the reason. And that changed history. That case changed history.
And I always thought that once I get enough time in, that I would be able to put in for commutation. But because they commuted his sentence, they don't want to commute nobody else's sentence.
But here I sit 26 years later, my prison record is impeccable. When I go see counselors for yearly reviews, they recommend commutation, they recommend parole, they recommend this. My family been there for me. I've watched my sons grow up in here. I got 2 grandsons now, and it's like, when does it all end? Where's the fairness? Where's the proportionality?
The question of whether or not they should be let out and their sentences are fair is a question of proportionality. Why can't the proportional response be, after 30 years and seeing that there's a different person there than the person who had the aptitude for murder, say, after 30 years, we'll let them out now? So it's partly a question of proportionality, whether sentences are fair.
I think incarceration is not just to punish one, but also to protect public safety. Now the Great Panthers, these guys who are older, up in age, are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, just based on the research, are no threat to public safety. I eventually became president of the Lifers Organization. Now the Lifers Organization was a political organization. It was established for one purpose and one purpose only, and that purpose was to change the law so that lifers can become eligible for parole.
I met Tyrone on D Block, you know what I mean? He always stood out without trying, right? He's president of Lifers, you can't help but gotta know who he is if you're a lifer. As a young lifer, man, I always watched him as a model, you know, like a positive model. How do you meet with outside people? How do you conduct yourself? How do you represent the lifers' cause? How do you navigate these different worlds to be the mayor of Graterford, but at the same time be a prisoner in Graterford?
And I was president for 20 years. And so I was doing a lot of research, talking to legislators and those kind of things.
At one point in Pennsylvania, we had enough geriatric prisoners that if we put them all in one facility, the entire facility could have qualified for Medicare. What societal benefit is achieved by keeping a 68-year-old person in prison?
As they grow older, since there's no commutation, that's the only way to get out, they die in prison. So we have 2 death penalties. One, would you get the death penalty imposed by a jury, and the second, when you get a life sentence that's really a death sentence. And this is what's so important about the Great Panthers and other lifer organizations, is that they have decided on their own, without any order from the Department of Corrections, to come together and meet and sit down at a table and talk.
Aging out is our idea of releasing aging prisoners who have proven that they are rehabilitated, proven that they will not recommit crimes. Most of us are infirm, suffering chronic illness, and we're just wasting away.
And they don't want to leave prison automatically. They just want the chance to go before a parole board to get paroled.
We're getting an opportunity to see that people who've been incarcerated over a long period of time have changed and transformed their thinking and are now able to be productive citizens in the community. And so I applaud all the men who've been released that's taken up that mantle.
Just recently, one of the guys I served a lot of time with in prison, about 6 months ago, he was released under the Supreme Court ruling that you can't give a juvenile a mandatory life without parole.
And in that decision, the United States Supreme Court said juveniles' brains are not well developed yet, and they have tremendous opportunities to change, grow, and become rehabilitated.
Currently, I think we've released about 70 juvenile lifers out of the 517 we have. I think we're at a real sentinel point for this issue.
My name is John Pace. I grew up here in West Philadelphia. For the most part, it was my mother trying to raise all of us. 7 boys, 4 girls. When we would come home from school, pretty much for the most part, my mom wasn't there. So it was like my brothers and sisters trying to raise us. And so that allowed me a lot of times just to, go out and roam the streets. And I think that was probably where some of the bad choices was made. The pattern was hanging out, getting high, and eventually robbing people. And so I remember that particular night, I just took some Valiums, I'd drunk some beer, and I smoked marijuana. So when I got up to 53rd Market, I think I seen an older gentleman. And so, in our minds, you see someone late at night, we call them marks. And so I guess I thought it was gonna be easy. Unfortunately, me and him got into a tussle when I went up to him, and so I pulled out the blackjack and I hit him with the blackjack. And once I hit him with the blackjack, a police officer just happened to be coming right up right away. And he said, "Come in." And I walked to him. They didn't know exactly how old I was. And so they was trying to discover exactly how old I was. And then they found out that I was only 17 years old, and they knew that they couldn't question me without the presence of my mom. And so originally what happened was I was just placed in the Youth Study Center, charged with aggravated assault and robbery and possession of an instrument of crime. Immediately I'm saying to myself, like, okay, I got to change my life around. And then finally, I think one day, I'm down at the Youth Study Center. They said, that man you hit upside the head, he passed away. And I just started breaking down tears. I was crying. And so they was like, yeah, you better cry. And so that was it. You know, just the idea that, you know, I'd caused someone's life to be taken, you know, I couldn't really, I couldn't process thought. At that moment, I didn't want to live.
It was not his intent to kill the person. His intent was simply to subdue him so that he could be able to take the money so that he could use it for more drugs. When the case came to court later on, he pled guilty, he apologized in court, and was contrite from the very beginning. And that has continued up to the present time, even though that's now 32 years ago now.
I think we all start out with that belief of an eye for an eye, even in our youngest days. And then when you start doing the work, you realize that there's a person behind each one of these crimes.
There's some people that simply say an eye for an eye, you know, and what do? Do you really try to convince them, or do you really display your character and who you are as a person, that you're not that person that made that poor decision?
And so that was huge and monumental for me, just to see that he got out. And in some respects, it's kind of sad for me also. It brings back up this sadness, because a lot of the men that, you know, I really care for who don't fit that criteria are going to be still in the same situation.
One of the important things that we should think about in aging out is that prisons were never built for elderly people. And what we have now is a large population of elderly people who have to struggle each day to exist, to survive. So it becomes, at the period of time, a form of torture, being in prison, being an elderly person. The society needs, especially the communities we come from, elderly men, because they could be a great part in influencing just their families. And that's where it starts from, one house at a time.
Most of the people that are coming in here come from impoverished communities, but everyone that's on the outside is making those decisions, so they would never understand it.
My supporters encouraged me to file. And I told them, no, I'm not filing for commutation because I couldn't make it. But they kept on me, they badgered me, and eventually I said, okay, I'll file. I never thought I was going to get a public hearing. Pardons Board did interview me. I had to sit in front of the 5 members in Harrisburg. About 150 people went up to that public hearing to support me. And I had the Philadelphia Police Commissioner send a representative up to speak on my behalf. When my name came up, one of the members raised their hand and said, we hold this case under advisement. The first time a life case had ever been held under advisement. But you know, in my mind, I'm thinking that it was going to be 30 to 90 days. Maybe want to check some facts or something and call me back up there and then actually take a vote. But actually they held it about 4.5 years before my case was called back up. Just my brother went up this time to get the vote. And so I was kind of nervous because I didn't know what was going to happen. And then that evening I called him and he said, look, man, you got the votes. And my knees buckled. I was like, wow, I mean, the feeling that I felt in that moment, I can't even describe for you. I just felt this gush of emotion. Because you got to imagine, psychologically, I had prepared myself to die in prison. And here it is. I just got word that if the governor saw favor in my case, that I would be free.
In general, I pardoned people who I thought the justice system had treated unfairly. And should Tyrone Werts have been punished? Yes. In the Palace of Truth and Justice, Tyrone should probably have done somewhere between 5 and 10 years in prison and gotten out in his mid to late 20s. Looking at what Tyrone has done now, think of all the good that Tyrone could have done in those years. Aside from the fact that a 69-year-old who had a sterling record in prison is obviously not a threat to go out and commit violent crimes, of course that person should be pardoned.
I mean, I was thrilled, elated. It was the total reversal of what I was feeling initially. But when I came off the block, D block, on my way home, there was a lot of guys in the hallway waiting for me, a lot of lifers that I had worked with over the years. And it was such an extraordinary event because nobody goes home with a life sentence. And you got to imagine all these guys, we all grew up together there. And we talking about almost 4 decades together, walking down the hallway and they was hugging me, man, take care of yourself. The day I walked out of here, man, I was crying like a baby. And people say, oh man, I know you're happy you're going home. I said, I ain't crying because I'm going home. I'm crying because of who I'm leaving behind. It was bittersweet. I was happy I was going home, but the tears was because of who I was leaving behind, man. We all were brothers. I said, I promise you this, that I will never come back to Graterford in handcuffs. Because one of the principles that we live by when life to get out is to do no harm. You know what I mean? I carry the weight of every lifer in this state on my back. When I went home, man, I tried to like represent lifers, you know. I mean, when I first got out, I would give talks. I would introduce myself. I would say, hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Tyrone Werts. I'm a lifer. And I tell people that lifers look like me. It's hard to see who you are in these damn brown uniforms. I'll be honest with you. That made me think that the wall is not there just to keep us in, but to keep the public out. See, they don't know who's behind this wall. I mean, a lot of you guys are really brilliant. You worked hard. You demonstrated who you are as human beings. And so I'm not any different than anybody sitting in these chairs, man. You know, you're no different. I try to let people know that, like, man, lifers are me. I mean, they look like me. They're smarter than me. They can do more things than me. They've been more successful than me inside of that. And those kind of stories I try to tell. You know, because we came in as really young men. A lot of us came in at, what, 18, 19. Some were juvenile, 14, 15, 16 years old. And now here we are, men in our 50s, some walking on canes, walkers, gray in their beards, gray in their hair. And I'm looking in their eyes saying, like, if nothing changed, they were all going to die there.
I think I was remembering, you know, you coming out. Right. I knew the juvenile lifer issue was following. Yeah. And I knew that you had employment and all that stuff then. I was just, you know, thinking about, so that gave me a lot of hope that this potential opportunity would be available. And so.
What was very rewarding for me was not only that he got out and that he's doing very, very well, is that he sits right beside me in my office as a co-worker. So we went from being people who serving life without parole together, and now we're both free, sitting side by side, working for the same organization.
Inside Out is the idea of two diverse groups coming together and dialoguing on what law enforcement is, what the criminal justice system is all about, but it's college students going into the prisons and having that tough conversation that we can learn from one another, the various perspectives. When I think about the men and women who are still currently incarcerated, and I think about what the program did for me in terms of developing a voice and particular skills, I want it to be expanded. And so, you know, because I'm relatively new, I'm like really finding my role, but one of the roles is, you know, the program has to be funded in some kind of way. So I'm looking at those different things because I knew the value of what it did for me personally. And so that's one of the reasons why I want to continue to expand the program.
He's thoughtful, he's well organized, he's an activist, and he wants to change things for the better. And I was very gratified to see all the very positive work he's done on behalf of other juvenile lifers and community groups since his release.
But when they did the juvenile lifer thing, they made it retroactive. I knew a lot of guys would come home. That's actually the best thing that could happen. And I got to tell Pace, they got to put them in situations where they are seen. So you got to debunk the myth that it's unsafe for the community to let lifers out, right? And so the more guys they see, they say, oh, well, it can't be that scary. These guys were serving life. Yeah, but you know, the good thing about, you know, y'all coming home, all the juvenile life, like I said, I think that bodes well for any legislation on generally for all the lifers, right? And I'm kind of optimistic. We were just at a meeting with legislators, lawyers, and things like that. And actually, the legislator that introduced the bill, Dawkins.
The bill number now is HB 135, and essentially what this bill does, it will allow an inmate after 15 years served in prison be eligible for parole. It does not mean that they're coming home. It just means that they have the option of being called up for parole and being able to go in front of the parole board who makes the decision. if they are able to be released or not. So this bill would be retroactively administrated to anyone who's currently serving life without parole, same way we have done with the Supreme Court ruling of the juvenile lifers.
Having dealt with a number of juvenile lifers and seen maybe 10 of my own clients get out, and in Pennsylvania there's about 80 or 90 that have been released, it's hopeful that that will change the conversation about harsh sentences. And life imprisonment without parole is about as harsh as they come. So whether people want someone to do an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth, and whether that's important to them, I looked back to the sentencing transcript of John from 2016. And there's something interesting in there. When we talk about whether people can change their initial reaction, it's clear that that actually happened in John Pace's case. The Baldwin family originally decided that the appropriate sentence for a life being taken was a person should spend their life in prison. However, when informed that Mr. Pace had accomplished much in prison, had accepted responsibility for his actions, and had grown and changed, so did they.
When I came out, there was like an overwhelming feeling that came over me that just yesterday I was in prison. And this is a reality now. And it was like a feeling that I couldn't really control, like just like being grateful for this opportunity. And so it's like, okay, what do you do with this opportunity? I went through a 6-week fellowship dealing with young people, particularly on drugs, and just young people making bad decisions.
The problem with convicted felons is they're often known by the mugshot. Their identity becomes what they did on the worst day of their life. So the current superintendent of Graterford tells the men, you're not the person who came into the institution. You are more than your mugshot.
We need to have common sense, middle of the road solutions so that those who do pose a harm and a risk to public safety are kept incarcerated, but then those who don't need to be given that opportunity.
So when you go down again?
April 5th.
April 5th,
I'm trying
okay.
to get actually pushed up.
All right, I'm definitely gonna be down there, and because I like to show my face. And a lot of times I go to the lawyer and say, hey, man, if you can let me say something, let me say something. You know?
What's the climate for a lot of dudes that's home now? Like a lot of the dudes that...
Oh, there's a lot of support out there for them, man. It's so much. I mean, because John Pace is running a support network. I mean, you come home as a juvenile lifer, man, there's a lot of support out there for you, you know what I mean? So, you too, man. You take care, man. I'll be down with both of y'all hearings, all right?
Okay.
All right.
I have taught inmates who have life sentences who I do not think should ever be released from prison. There are other people that distinguish themselves. You find quite a few people with leadership ability. I would be happy if they were out and were my neighbors. I think they're very decent people. Maybe they were angry when they went in, these lifers with 20, 30, 40 years, but they're very calm, very stabilizing, very good influences on others within the prison, and I do think they deserve to get out.
It's critical for me to work as hard as I can, but this is very important to me. As committed I am when I was inside, I'm just as committed on the outside. And I just want you guys to be hopeful, because there's a lot of good things going on. You know, they're all around the country. You know, everybody's on this train about changing the law so that give people access to freedom. And the best thing that happened was the juvenile life is going home. I think my life, it is racked with tragedy and victory. I'm very elated and happy about the juvenile lifers. That just points out even more the need for a change in the law so that other people who don't fit the juvenile lifers criteria can have an opportunity.
Wow, that's a powerful film. And thank you to Tyrone Werts and John Pace for bringing their stories forward to us. Again, you are watching The Mayor of Graterford, and I'm here with the director, Jack McCarthy, and Tara Coughlin, that was behind the camera and helped with the sound as well. And I have to say that the production values were very good on this too. I really liked a lot. It was really, I think, very streamlined. Everything from the intro, it brought you in, and it just carried the story in a very nice way. I'm sure that you had to make a lot of hard choices about where you would carry the storyline and what kind of limitations you were working with.
Yeah, that was honestly the toughest part, was because prison reform is such a massive topic that you can go in 60 different directions of, and they're all interesting, and they're all important. So it was really tough for us to boil down the film to the absolute core essentials of what do we absolutely need in this film, that if we watched it at the premiere, we would go, oh, God, how did we not include that? That was a mistake. So that was the criteria that we kind of used to what absolutely needs to be in the film. But it was tough.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. There's a lot of, obviously, race and money have so much to do with how the criminal justice system, how biased and skewed it often is. There's more African American men in prison than there are in college, and there's more, much more of a likely chance to an African American man be sent to prison than a white, wealthy man, obviously. So I think we definitely touched on that issue, and just the overall biasness of the criminal justice system was a huge topic.
Yes, and even just like we were discussing earlier about the producing end of that as well. As far as you've had some incredible reactions to this as well. As it's been in the film festival circuit. Would you touch a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've been nominated for three film festivals, and it's been a really amazing experience of getting people, positive reactions from people is great after you've put years of work into a film. And it's even better that now this film is getting in the hands of legislators, and it's being shown at the State House, and we're getting really positive responses from people that we absolutely did not expect to, warmly receive this film, given the subject matter. And it looks like it's going to be changing the law. So that was the absolute dream goal. I mean, past any film festival or anything like that, to push this issue forward that's the dream, and it's happening. So it's been really amazing.
Wow. Yeah, it's one thing to really just make a documentary about the subject and walk away from it, but our whole goal was to really make a positive change in this subject matter.
Wow, that's amazing. That has to be the most wonderful feeling to think that you might be making so many lives for the better. And all the people, John Pace in there was talking about, I think it was him, that his children, or no, I'm sorry, maybe it was another person being interviewed, was talking about how he never sees his children because they just never, so the more that we can make things come about for the better, it's wonderful.
100%.
The goal.
Yeah. So what else can you possibly do with this film? Do you think that you can try to get it online? We're going to be airing it here, of course. Mm-hmm. Can we somehow find other outlets for this?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we talked about that towards the end of the filmmaking process. We were like, geez, it would really be a shame if this died on the film festival circuit and only a handful of people saw it. So this is a film that we actually absolutely intend on releasing publicly and getting as many eyes on as humanly possible, because it's just too important of an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to take a life of its own, right?
Yep.
And it seems like it is doing that. Just wonderful. So how do you, in this whole process, you go, you shoot, you come back, you have the editing process, you have another interview on another day. Is it the whole class that's getting together in this process and discussing this?
Yeah, so there was a team of editors that we all worked really well together, and we would come up with cuts, and we would alternate who goes in this time, who comes in at the night, and it was an all hands on deck kind of thing. And when we would have a new cut, we would show it to everybody. We would garner feedback from everybody, and then kind of implement it that way. So it was definitely a collaborative process to get to the final product.
Definitely. Him and some of the other teammates were in the documentary room until like wee hours of the morning trying to put it all together.
Yeah, and the instructor for this class, Steve McWilliams, he has been helping to hone this whole process and help with the producing end as well.
100%. There would be no Mayor of Graterford without Steve. I mean, he was the one that introduced us to the topic, and he was the one that would line up these interviews that we would all go like, what? We got that person? They're in the movie? So, I mean, yeah, there would be no movie without him, and he helped us with the filmmaking process along the way, and we've all learned a lot from him, and it was a really, really great experience to work with Steve.
And awesome. We were all together the first day when we went to the prison the first time. It was definitely a crazy experience, and like we all really like stuck together in it because we were going into this maximum security prison. They even told me, they're like, just to let you know, a lot of these guys haven't seen a girl in like 20 years, so good luck. But we all like really stuck together and like made it really work.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're a very cohesive group. That had you even anticipated that when you wound up getting involved in this class? You know, as far as being you were both communications majors, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, to think that you're going to sign up and within a semester, is it just one semester that you do this class?
No, it's over the course of a year.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. 1 year. Yeah.
Yeah. So we try to focus on production in that first semester of trying to get as much shot and as much planned as possible for the film, and then we try to focus on the second semester really editing and getting the story all together.
And like this year, Jack graduated last year. I'm still a senior, and this year our documentary is on the heroin crisis that's that like has plagued Philadelphia. So that's also been a really interesting experience.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So we have even as you're working along the timeline of you just finished that, then you have the next project in, and we'll look forward to being able to air that as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
As far as how long, just talking a little bit more about Tyrone Werts, how long was he in prison for?
Yeah, Tyrone was in prison for 37 years. Okay. Which is just, every time you hear that, it's just mind-boggling. It's the guy who hurt nobody and was just completely wronged by the criminal justice system. As he said in the film, he had an all-white jury, and he did not stand a chance given his situation. It's an embarrassment on the criminal justice system, and hopefully this brings to light this issue that, I mean, none of us knew about this before the film. So we're hoping that this film can educate people when it comes to this issue and garner change.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think that it was a really interesting to listen to him talk about his own education when he wanted to be an astronaut, and then he never really believed that he could, be smart enough to do anything, and then ends up getting his master's at Villanova. Is that what all the way to a master's level?
So yeah, he had that horrible story with his teacher, and we went back and forth in the process of trying to figure out, like, as we were just talking about what do we need in this 40-minute movie, and that just felt like something that had to be in there, because to be told at a young age that you're not going to amount to anything, I mean, that's scarring for life. That sets you on a path that is extremely difficult to correct, and only in prison did he really fall in love with education and learn that he had the ability to learn, because he spent his whole life thinking that he was unintelligent, which was completely wrong.
I think he had the highest grade in the class for the GED, and he it was then that he realized, like, oh, I can do things, like I can be whatever I want, and that's when he really went on that path.
And can you tell me a little bit about this program that he did through Villanova as well?
Yeah, so he went through the Villanova degree program that is in Graterford, and he got a general degree and got to take philosophy and a lot of interesting courses with amazing professors like Joe Betts, who is in the film, who knew Tyrone, and people like that going into the prison and basically volunteering their time for a good cause are just invaluable to an issue like this.
Definitely. It's been really, it's great that these professors also volunteer their time going into a very intense situation, trying to teach maybe not the most patient of individuals, and they really take it to heart and have a lot of patience with them.
Yeah. And then you have people who probably really appreciate it and are that's wonderful. There's also the organization, the Grey Panthers, that was mentioned in there too. Can you touch a little more on maybe if you know about their whole process of what they do?
Yeah, so the Grey Panthers were, as Tyrone said in the film, established for one purpose and one purpose only, and it was to change the law so that lifers who have served crazy amounts of time, 40, 50 years, have a chance at being paroled, because in the current system, they'd have to be pardoned, which is much less likely to happen than being paroled. It's much more of a political process. So the Grey Panthers they're advocating for aging out for elderly prisoners who have shown over the course of their sentences that they have changed and they have been rehabilitated and they are served are no threat to the public safety.
Definitely. They really work together. They introduced us some amazing guys, and some of them never even hurt anyone or killed anyone ever before, who were serving crazy prison sentences because of laws that were changed when there was the tough on crime aspect of this whole criminal justice procedure. So many of these guys were spending 40, 50 years in prison for maybe some burglaries they did in very tough situations. So that really was something that we touched on a lot.
Yeah, punishment doesn't fit the crime.
Yeah. Not even close.
Yeah. So I think that this has been, as I said, it was really so fluid. I think that you all did such an exceptional job bringing this all together, and I think we'll see what happens with potentially making history with this too. It's going to be great impact to a lot of people, and it already has been, I'm sure. Yeah. So awareness is everything, and I love the fact that Villanova does this. I actually didn't know that this program had existed until more recently. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Does the communications side have any other, with the social justice part? Is there any other outlet that you have with that besides the documentary making that you do?
This class is really one of a kind in terms of Villanova. There's no other class that's really like it. This is not a class where you go and you get a textbook and you read chapter 1 and then you fill out chapter 1 on a test and then you don't remember chapter 1. This is a class where you go into this issue and you go head on into the issue, really. You're going into a prison. You're learning to meet these men and learning their stories, and you're learning how to operate a camera, how to edit. So there's really nothing like it at Villanova.
Yeah. And it's really you have to be very extemporaneous when you're sometimes it's in the car, sometimes it's in the prison or a home, and that's got to be shot, get your shots lined up and get them mic'd, right? So that also presents its challenges as well.
Definitely.
100%.
Yeah. But really, I mean, as I said, I thought the production values myself, I thought was very impressive, and the camera work was very nice as well. So I think even considering all the challenges that you had,
You know, it's been great, and I'm really grateful that you came in today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And again, you were watching The Mayor of Graterford, and this is Student Docs with Radnor Studio 21, and we anticipate having another documentary with us here again next month. So please keep an eye out for it.